The Albanese government has hardened Australia's criticism of Israel in key UN votes. Australia previously abstained. It will potentially deepen a rift over the Middle East with the United States as incoming President Donald Trump prepares to strengthen American support for the Jewish state. Joining me live is Liberal Senator and former Ambassador to Israel, Dave Sharma. Dave, good to see you. Thanks for coming on the program. So how will the United States be viewing this decision at the UN?
Well, it's important to understand, Kenny, that Australia has voted for both resolutions. The United States, under the Biden administration, Joe Biden is still in office, voted against the resolutions. So our position is at odds with that of the Biden administration. It's certainly at odds with the incoming Trump administration. And I don't think this is an isolated case of where we are likely to find a large amount of daylight between us and the US administration.
Why do you think the government has changed its votes on these matters at the UN at this time after the Albanese government previously voted against it? And is this vote change likely to bring the Middle East closer to that two-state solution?
Well, look, it's very important to understand that these two resolutions, one dates from 2003, one from 2006, Australia has always voted against or abstained on those resolutions, including in the first years of the Albanese government. Now, what has changed over the past year to cause them to change their vote? There's only two things I can think of, Kenny. One, Hamas committed the horrific terrorist attacks of the 7th of October. And two, the Muslim vote movement has emerged in Australia, which is threatening the seats of key Labor members. Now, the only conclusion you can reach about the government's change of vote is, one, they're rewarding acts of terror overseas, and two, they're trying to appease a domestic political constituency. Neither of these should be guiding national interest decisions like this, but that is the only explanation that is available from this Labor government.
Foreign Minister Penny Wong says it's the latest conflict that is the reason the government has changed its voting status on these resolutions. But the resolutions do not make mention that the latest conflict was started by Hamas. Does that matter?
It matters greatly, Kenny. I mean, both of these resolutions, the text dates from 2003 to 2006, they had changed slightly year to year, but the text is the same. So the texts make no mention of the 7th of October terrorist attacks. They don't make no mention of Hezbollah's firing of rockets. They make no mention of the hostages. They make no mention of the Iranian barrage of missiles into Israel. And it's preposterous for Penny Wong or her spokesperson to say that we're changing our vote in light of recent circumstances when the texts themselves go back 20 years and don't take account of recent circumstances. It's a fanciful reason. And the fact that Penny Wong's sent out a spokesperson to issue these comments rather than owning up to the decision herself, I think tells you everything about how shameful this act is.
The government has been working behind the scenes to secure coalition support in a bid to bypass minor parties and independents on plans to overhaul and put limits on political donations. Will Labor get coalition support on this, or will there need to be changes, do you think?
Look, I'm not involved in those details myself, the negotiations rather myself, Kenny, but we have indicated a willingness in the past to work in a bipartisan fashion with Labor to make sure that big money does not become an influential force in politics, as we saw it become at the last election with the amount of money the Teals both solicited and spent in individual campaigns. I think we can all agree in Australia that money should not determine the outcome of elections, and we're prepared to work cooperatively with Labor to put in place guardrails around that.
Do you think it will pass by the end of the year?
Well, the Labor government has a lot of legislation that they are trying to get through the parliament. There's 2 sitting weeks left in this year. We have to see where this stacks up in terms of priorities. But you'd hope that they, prioritise areas where there is strong bipartisan support rather than some very contentious legislation they've got, like the misinformation bill, for instance, which there's no expert support and very limited support in the parliament for. I hope they prioritise things that are more likely to make a difference and not harm Australia.
Just while I've got you, pro-Palestinian activists say they will ignore pleas from police to respect the Myer Christmas window display holiday ritual, forcing its cancellation. What's your reaction to that?
I'm shocked by this, Kenny, that the activists and the radicals now want to cancel Christmas. This just shows you how out of hand we've allowed our streets to become. Not only are protesters disrupting CBDs and shopping areas in Melbourne and Sydney and potentially elsewhere every Sunday, causing loss to businesses, deterring people from coming in, creating a threatening environment, and they have been allowed to do this week after week. Now they want to take away Christmas. I mean, you couldn't write a sketch about this, you know. It's beyond belief, and it's well beyond time for state and federal governments to start enforcing the law and denying these protesters permits for the continued disruption that they cause.
Dave Sharma, really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you. Coming up, why King Charles chose to spend his